Hello, biologists. Today's lecture is going to be all about invertebrates, so critters without a vertebral backbone, either of cartilage or of bone. So these are all no spine. And that's okay because these are very successful organisms. In fact, they make up 97% of animals on Earth. So let's get into this group. Here is our phylogenetic tree. We're talking about metazoans. Those are going to be our animals. We're going to divide them into groups based on their tissue. So we have ones with tissue and ones without tissue. Without tissue is going to be our sponges. Those are going to be odd, but beautiful. And then inside your tissue group, we're going to have specialized tissue. Then we're going to base it on your symmetry. Is it bilateral symmetry or is it radial symmetry? Radial symmetry is going to be our cnidarians. After symmetry, we're going to discuss body cavity. We call that a coelom. So spelled colome, but it's pronounced coelom. So acoelomates are going to be invertebrates. And then some of our coelomates are going to be vertebrates as well. We have mostly invertebrates in this group. Then based on how your little tiny ball of cells develops, we're going to divide it into the protostomes and the deuterostomes. In the deuterostomes, we have two groups, echinodermata, which is going to be sea stars. Those are invertebrates, and chordates, which is the group that we're in, but there's also invertebrates in this group too. Then your protostoma, we have all of these awesome critters, all invertebrates. So here's the takeaway. Most of life is invertebrates. Vertebrates are a much smaller group, although incredibly cool, and that's the topic of our next lecture. So we're going to classify our animals based on their embryonic tissue. If they do not have true embryonic tissue, they are the parazoa. Zoa, remember, pronounce every vowel. If they do have embryonic tissue, they are metazoa. And then they can have two types, which will be diploblastic, or three types, tripoblastic. Here's the sponges. They are the least evolved, the simplest of our animals. And so they are going to be parazoa. They do not have true tissue. We also discuss symmetry. So if you're asymmetrical like a sponge, there's no clear way to divide you into equal parts. If you're bilateral, we can divide you right down the middle and the two sides look really similar. So we have bilateral symmetry. You can divide me down the center line and my right and my left half look similar. That's not true if you divide me like sideways at my belly button. My top and my bottom half are not similar. Then we have radial symmetry. Here is going to be one of our sea anemones. You could divide it along any of these lines and it would look symmetrical on either side. Sponges are in the phylum Porifera. They're the simplest of all animals. They're all aquatic. There's no terrestrial ones. They are filter feeders. They are asymmetrical. They are parazoans, which means they have no true embryonic tissue. They're stationary as adults. That's what sessile means. They cannot move, but their larvae can move. They can reproduce asexually and sexually. When they do reproduce sexually, they're all hermaphroditic, meaning they make both sperm and egg, and they just release those into the water around them and hope that they find each other. There's about 8,800 species. We say that they have no true embryonic tissue, but they do have an organization of cells. So this is what a sponge body plan looks like. They have holes in their body where they suck in water and blow it out the osculum. That's going to be the central hole. That's how they suck in water to filter feed. If we looked in their mesophyll, we would see that there are specialized cells. So they have cells to create the water current. They have cells for maintaining their body and reproducing. So it's not like they are not complicated, but they are not as organized as other critters that we're going to discuss. Then we have phylum Cnidaria. Cnidaria are going to be our sea anemones and all sorts of other great creatures. This is a large phylum. They are metazoan, meaning they have true embryonic tissue. They have two types, so they're diploblastic. They have radial symmetry. They have specialized cells called cnididocytes. You don't pronounce the C, by the way, so this is Cnidaria, and these are cnidocytes. Here is a cnidocyte, and inside the cnidocyte, they have nematocysts. Those are stinging cells. So think about a jellyfish sting. That's a nematocyst. They have a primitive type of nervous system called a nerve net, and they have a gastrointestinal cavity where it's one opening. So they have one hole into their system instead of two. They will reproduce asexually or sexually. Some are hermaphroditic, producing both sperm and egg. Some are separate sexes, meaning that one produces sperm, one produces egg. And there's about 10,000 species. Here is our first class in the Cnidaria. Our Cnidaria here are going to be the sea anemones, sea pins, which is this guy here, really beautiful. This is your sea anemone, and corals. So those are the three in our Anthozoa. There's about 6,000 species, and I have a video for you about watching a sea anemone swim. It's pretty cool. You might think these can't swim, but they can, and it's fantastic. They are hunters. They immobilize their prey with those specialized cells. The next group in the Cnidaria is the Scyphozoa. There's about 3,000 species. These are free swimming. Here is an example of a body of plan. They're going to have that gastrovascular cavity, but in this case, it's sectioned off into pieces called diverticula. You're going to hear that word later when we talk about our own digestive cavities. They have sexual reproduction, so more complicated, and now they're no longer hermaphroditic. Their life cycle is pretty cool, so check this out. Here is a jellyfish. It is in two stages. One is called the medusa, and one is called the polyp. Here, the medusa stage, the tentacles hang down. So think Medusa's hair hangs down. That's how you remember Medusa. So Medusa is free swimming, hunting, living its life. Then it releases its sperm and eggs from separate organisms into the water. They find each other, they get fertilized, they create a zygote. That zygote undergoes mitosis, creating a planula larva. That is going to be like a worm, and it's going to have fringe, and it's going to swim around the ocean. It'll find somewhere nice to land, and it will become sessile, so it'll become stationary. This phase is called a polyp. Looks like polyp, but polyp. Here's your polyp. That polyp will create fringe at the top. So polyps have fringe at the top, medusas have fringe at the bottom. This will start to tighten up and cut off, and this will bud off. So doesn't this kind of look like a jellyfish that's upside down? So this will cut itself off. It will turn itself over, and it will grow with mitosis into the medusa, pre-medusa stage. So this is like the baby jellyfish stage. And then it will develop into a full jellyfish, and the life cycle will start again. So different life forms. If you looked at this, you might not think that's going to become a jellyfish, but it does. Then we have cubozoa. These are similar to jellies, which I learned to call them jellyfish. They're now called jellies. So forgive me for saying jellyfish. The fish part is a misnomer. They're not a fish, but habits are hard to break. So they are jellies and not jellyfish. I'll do my best. So they're similar to jellyfish, jellies. There's only 50 species. These are really cool because they have the formation of beginnings of eyes, including lenses, cornea, retina. So it's a really interesting step in evolution. Then we have hydrozoa. Hydrozoa has about 3,000 species. One of the famous one is the Portuguese man-of-war. This is the Portuguese man-of-war. It's actually colonial, so it's made of lots of little individuals working together. It has this swollen bladder here with a ridge on top, so it floats on the surface of the ocean, and it can be really long, up to 100 feet long, and this little ridge catches the wind, and so they just kind of float around like a sailboat floating on the ocean. We also have hydra in this group. Hydra are beautiful. They're itty-bitty, they're solitary, they're carnivorous, so it uses these arm-like projections to grab food and shove it into its gullet. And if you cut them in half, they regenerate. If we cut their arms off, they regenerate. We think that they may be immortal. They're really incredible little creatures. Lots of research going into how they can control their cells to regenerate like they do. Now we have another group. So we're getting out of the Cnidaria. This is superphylum Lophotrochozoa. So just pronounce every vowel. These are going to be tripoblastic, so it's going to have three types of embryonic tissue. We're going to see bilateral symmetry. the beginning of cephalization. Cephalization refers to having a head. So the sea anemones didn't have a head region. Now we're going to start to see heads. And these are all protostomes, which means we have two different ways of developing. So if we look at the top first, if your cells cleave in a spiral formation, and then as you develop this little sac, which we call a gastrula, that little sac is going to have an entrance called a blastopore. If this blastopore develops into the mouth, then you are a protostome, proto being first, think mouth first. The other option is when you are a little 8-celled ball of fertilized egg doing mitosis. So you get fertilized and you go 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells. Your cleavage is radial. You develop this gastrula stage. You have a blastopore, but this hole, the first hole, the blastopore, develops into the anus first. Those are deuterostomes. So whether or not the mouth developed first or the anus develops first lets us classify into these two groups. What we're going to discuss right now are protostomes. They tend to be further out on the evolutionary tree. We are deuterostomes, so vertebrates are going to be deuterostomes. In this group, in this superphylum, we have platyhelminthes, which are going to be worms, rotifera, Nemerti, it's hard to say T, but Nomerti, mollusca, those are mollusks, and annelids, those are worms. Here is our phylum Platyhelminthes. These are flatworms. They do not have a body cavity, so we call them acoelomates. Remember, a coelom is a body cavity, and if you put A in front of it, then they don't have that thing. So acoelomates is just a solid mass of tissue, no space inside. This includes the really adorable planaria. This is a planaria right here. It is small, it's flat, it has eye spots that look kind of like doofy cartoon eyes, really cute. And the less adorable tapeworm, which I'm not going to show you a picture of because parasites gross me out. We also have really beautiful marine worms in the Platyhelminthes. What's cool about planaria is just like Hydra, they have incredible regeneration. So if I were to cut this in half, it grows into 2. You can cut off their heads and it still grows a whole new body. Absolutely incredible. We also have phylum Rotifera in this superphylum. Rotiferas are called the wheel bearers because they have a structure called a corona. Here in this body plan diagram, we have a corona up here in green. These little cilia on the top of it rotate, and so it looks like a turning wheel, and that helps it create a vortex in the water, and it sucks water into its body, and that's where it digests it in its stomach. Here we start to see that there is a division between the body part. We have a head, so cephalization, a trunk that contains that little stomach, and a foot that holds it in place, or the foot will have a little tail and it can be free swimming. These are marine and freshwater. There's about 2,000 species. Here's what one looks like in the microscope. So this is going to be where its corona is. You can see there's some fringe right here. That would be twirling and pulling water into itself that could filter in food. Here's its trunk and here's its foot. It'll use its little foot to steer itself as it moves through its freshwater environment. Nemerta are going to be ribbon worms. So we're going to have another type of worms. These ones are ribbon. They're called ribbon because they kind of look like ribbons. They're flat. They're fringy on the edges. They're all marine, mostly marine, predominantly bottom dwellers. We don't really know a ton about them, but there's about 900 of them. They do have a primitive brain, and just like the Hydra and the planaria, they seem to be incredible at body regeneration. Next, we have mollusca. Mollusks are super successful. About 25% of all marine life is a mollusk. So that's really great. Here is the body plan of a stereotypical mollusk. It has a mantle. So a mantle is going to be the part that covers all of its viscera, which are the organs. That mantle to us looks like a shell if it has a shell, but things like slugs don't have a shell, they still have a mantle. So the mantle is like the covering part of their organs, may or may not have a shell. Then it's going to have a mouth with a specialized tongue called a radula. That radula is like, you know how a cat's tongue is rough? Think even rougher, and it scrapes. So they scrape their food off and roll it into their stomach. They don't bite, they scrape. So they scrape with their sandpaper tongue. It's a radula. They also are going to breathe through gills. So where their gills are dependent on the type of organisms. Snails have their gills right under the entrance to their shell, and they're going to move around with a muscular foot. Here, the muscular foot is the base of the snail that it contracts and creeps and crawls with. There's about 100,000 species, and they're highly variable. So we use a snail as an example because it's something we're quite familiar with. By the way, this is our native snail, the Pacific sideband snail. Really beautiful. You can find it everywhere in our area, but there is a lot of variation in this group. There's 8 different classes. The first 2 are shellless. They still have a mantle, but no shell. They're deep ocean dwelling. We don't know a lot about them, so we're going to kind of gloss over them. Next, this one we thought was extinct until pretty recently, but now we don't think it's extinct anymore. And in fact, we have 25 species. It's a deep ocean with a shell, but we still don't understand it well. And then we have chitons. Chitons are really common in tide pools. They look like this. It looks almost like it's a barnacle. It's got a shell of 8 plates, but it's got a muscular foot under there, and it creeps around, it breathes through grills, and it uses that radula to eat, unlike a barnacle. A barnacle is going to be a filter feeder. The next set of our 8 classes are the ones we're much more familiar with. We have gastropoda. Gastro means stomach, poda means foot. So these are the stomach feet. These are snails, slugs, conches, calories, limpets. Then we have cephalopoda. Remember, cephalization referred to having a head. So these are the head feet. They're going to be things like octopuses, which just has a face and a head, and then legs. Squids, cuttlefish, and nautilus. Then we have bivalvia. Bivalves are going to have 2 shells on a hinge. So think a clam or an oyster or a mussel or a scallop. So those are still in the same group of snails, but look nothing like snails. And then the last one we have are the boat feet. They kind of look like sea slugs. They're often buried in the sand. They're not well known yet. Our next group is Annelida. So these are the annelids. These are segmented worms. In this group, we have our lovely earthworm. You can see all the segments on its body. There's 22,000 different species. They have a full digestive system, so they have a mouth and an anus, and they have an incomplete respiratory system, which means they breathe through their skin. They don't have lungs. They don't have little openings for them to breathe through. We have 2 types of annelids. We have marine worms, which are the polychaetes, and we have the oligochaetes, which are earthworms and leeches. Here's a beautiful little earthworm for us. Now we have another superphylum. So we are getting out of our group that contained gastropods, that was mollusks, and we're getting into Echidzoa. Sound confident when you say it. All of these animals together create the largest group of animals. This is going to include our bugs. So that's like the most popular type of animal on Earth. And all of these animals go through a molding process where they shed a exoskeleton, and this is called ecdysis. I often like to go backwards when I'm having trouble pronouncing words. So cis, di, ecdysis. That helps me. But it's also okay to struggle with the vocab because these are huge, weird Latin words. All of these are going to be protostomes, which means the mouth developed first from that gastrula stage with the pore. And we have 3 phyla that we care about in here. We have Nematoda. Those are our roundworms, very successful. Tardigrada are tardigrades, and Arthropoda are insects. Here we see a cicada, by the way, shedding its scale. Phylum Nematoda, these are roundworms. One of our favorites is C. elegans. We always say C. elegans because its genus name is really long and hard to pronounce. Go ahead and try and pronounce it yourself. I'm going to abstain. These are so numerous. They're in every habitat in huge quantities. There's about 28,000 different species. Most are parasites. There's a great quote in your textbook that said, if you removed all life on Earth except for the roundworms, the planet would look pretty much the same. That's how many of them there are. It's just incredible. C. elegans, this one species, is a really important model organism for us and really important to studying genetics. We can knock out genes and see the response in these little critters. So most labs, if you're going to practice lab work with biological models, will have C. elegans in the lab. Then we have phylum Tardigrada. These are the tardigrades. These are commonly called water bears. There's about 1,000 species. This is what it looks like in the microscope. You can see its little legs, super cute, big chubby body. And then these two pictures are from scanning electron microscopy. So this is what its overall surface looks like. This is its little mouth. It doesn't really have a face, but it does have these chubby little arms. And so someone thought it looked like a bear, the water bears. These tend to be incredibly resilient. So they can be fully dehydrated and survive. They have been taken onto the International Space Station and put outside into the radiation and the vacuum of space, and they survived that. They might be immortal. They seem to be really, really, really difficult to kill. So really incredible little creatures. Then we have phylum Arthropoda. This is the most successful animal on Earth. It is 85% of all species of animal. So just, wow, bugs. There are 1,134,000 different species identified so far, and we're learning more every year. They're subdivided into 5 phyla, and their body forms are variable, but they follow this plan. So here we have a honeybee as our example. In our honeybee, we have jointed feet. That's actually what Arthropoda means. Poda means foot. Anthro means jointed. So it's going to have jointed feet. They're still insects, so they have 6 legs, mostly. They're going to have antennae. They're going to have a head, and their body is going to be segmented into parts. So after your head, they're going to have a thorax, and then they're going to have an abdomen. So we're segmenting the body into pieces. They have an exoskeleton made of chitin, so they're chitinized. They have a central cavity, and they're going to have a breathing system where they're going to breathe in from these little holes called spiracles in the side of their body, and they're going to attach to tubes called trachea. So here's the little tubes that they're going to breathe into. In Arthropoda, we're going to have a extinct class called Trilobita. This is subphyla Trilobita. They lived about 500 million years ago. The fossils are incredible, really beautiful, highly diverse. These were super successful. Even though they don't exist now, we've learned a lot about the evolution of arthropods from their fossils. So we like to talk about them because they show us that those characteristics, the jointed feet, the segmentation of the head, the thorax, and the abdomen, are all existent. We have subphyla Chelicerata. So Chelicerata is named for a specialized mouth part called a chelicerae. So this is the word chelicerae. That is on this spider here, these pink parts. So they're specialized feeding structures right in the mouth, chelicerae. We also have in this group horseshoe crabs, spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites, about 77,000 species. And then outside of their chelicerae, they have these little arms that help them grab their food and manipulate it. Those are called pedipalps. So these little appendages, pedipalps, and their teeth part called chelicerae help us organize this group. This is a jumping spider, just one of the cutest little spiders. In phylum Arthropoda, we also have Myriapoda. This is going to be our centipedes and millipedes. The difference between them is their legs based on segment. So we're going to have centipedes, which have 1 set of legs per segment. These are also carnivores. And then we're going to have millipedes, and they are going to be herbivores, and they'll have 2 sets of legs per segment. Unlike their names, Millie and Cinti, they don't have 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 100 legs. It's dependent on the genera, but they do have a division of whether or not it's 1 set of legs or 2 set of legs. We also have crustaceans in the Arthropoda, so subphyla Crustacea. We have crabs, lobsters, crayfish, isopods, and barnacles. Isopods are like the pill bugs. They're the only ones that are terrestrial. Every other group in this is going to be marine. So here we have a shrimp and a crab. Those are what we're used to as our marine crustaceans. So if you're allergic to shrimp and crab, do not eat roly-polies or potato bugs or pill bugs, whatever you call this in your family, because you're probably allergic to it as well. They're going to respire through gills, and their shell, the part that you peel off when you eat them, is referred to as a carapace. We have hexapoda. These are the insects. They definitely have 6 legs. They respire through those spiracles in their body that connect to those branches called trachea. There's 5,500,000 species. So super diverse. Here we have a cute little fly, and then we have a butterfly, but highly variable, very successful group, the hexapoda. In the hexapoda, I want to show you a phylogenetic tree because your book doesn't break down the different classifications. And I don't necessarily want you to memorize this slide, but I do want to show you the diversity within this group because hexapoda is so much more than just 6-legged bugs. They all do have that characteristic, but there's a lot in there. So here we have 2 sister groups that are the out group from the rest of the bugs. Here we have the subclass Insecta. In Insecta, we're going to go through down here. These are our true insects, and you're going to see things that you recognize. Diptera are flies, Lepidoptera are butterflies, Coleoptera are beetles, Hymenoptera are going to be ants, bees, and wasps. Hemiptera are true bugs. So I want you to know that the subclassifications inside of insects are highly variable and really interesting. And if you went into each of these subgroups, like the Coleoptera, there are just so much variation inside of beetles and their body shape and their color and their habitat that is just fascinating. So if you like bugs, if you want to study bugs, you can become an entomologist, and they are people who study insects. We're going to go to another superphylum now, Deuterostoma. So everything that we talked about has been neither a deuterostome or a protostome or a protostome. In Deuterostoma, which is the group that we exist in, we're going to have 2 major clades. We have chordata, which includes the vertebrates. This lecture is about invertebrates. We have 2 types of invertebrates. We have the urochordates, and then we have the cephalochordates. Cephalo referring to heads, chordates referring to this group. We also have the ambulacraria, which is going to be the echinoderms and the hemichordatas. Echinoderms are what we're going to discuss now. Those are the invertebrates. And here you have your phylogenetic tree. So echinoderma, invertebrates, and then these 2 here, invertebrates. So phylum Echinodermata. Echino means spiky, and dermata is skin. So it's kind of prickly skin, and you can see that texture on a starfish. Sea stars are what we call them now. We're trying to get rid of calling things fish that are not fish. I learned these as starfish, just like I learned jellyfish is jellyfish. So I'll try my best to say sea stars because that's the appropriate term. We also have sea cucumbers, sea urchins, sand dollars, and brittle stars, about 7,000 species. Instead of being radial symmetry, they have pentaradial, which means if you divide it along one of its arms, the sides are symmetrical. But if you don't divide it across an arm, it's not symmetrical. So there's only 5 places where you could divide its body and have symmetry. And they have a water vascular system, which is so cool. They suck in water. They hold it into these little rings. Each of these rings is attached to a tube feet. Down here, we can see a tube foot in detail. So this is full of water. When it wants to step or move, it will contract this ampulla, and that will push this podium forward. The podium is what grabs onto something and sticks to it. I have a video of how sea stars move on Blackboard for you, so I'm excited for you to check that out. Then we have our phylum Chordata. This is the group we exist in. All of the chordata at some point in development, because this isn't true for us now, but it was true when you were in utero. They have a dorsal hollow nerve cord, which will run down the back of the organism. They have a notochord, which is right below that. In us, this turns into the spine and the spinal cord. They have a post-anal tail, so past the anus. Our tail is removed before we are born. Sometimes some people still have a tail. That's pretty cool. And they have pharyngeal gill slits. So pharyngeal refers to the area. Gill slits are the structural feature. We have those as well in development, but they go away before we are born. In phylum Chordata, we have two invertebrates. We have Urochordata, which are the tunicates. I don't have a picture of this, but your book talks about them, so that's there for you. The one that I chose to highlight was a lancelet. Here's a lancelet. They hide out in the ground. So this is a marine creature. Up here would be the water. This is the soil underground or the deep ocean dirt. And they stick their body into it, and they hold their head above it. They have these little tentacles. They take those little tentacles, they pull in food, and they can insert themselves in to hide or stick themselves out more to eat. But they have all of the features that we use to classify chordata, except these little lanceolets do not have a vertebrae, so they are invertebrates. And that is our last example of invertebrates. Wow, what a massive category of critters. Again, 97% of all animals on Earth. And I hope you found that fun. If you have any questions, email me, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.